Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lucy Sandell, and I work with the Career Development Team here at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park. I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar entitled Harnessing Failure to Succeed. The recording will be shared with all registrants in the next few days. Today's speaker is Hélène T. Stelian. Hélène is a life coach, blogger, speaker, and mom to twin girls. Hélène was raised in Paris and Connecticut and received her BA from Duke University, her MBA from Washington University in St. Louis, and is completing a certificate in editing from the Graham School here in Chicago at University of Chicago. She's worked in retail and brand management for Fortune 500 companies over the course of a decade before becoming a writer, enabling her to stay at home after the birth of her twin daughters, Bianca and Indigo. Indigo is a rising second-year student of the college class of 2020. Hélène was raised in Paris until the age of 13. Fearless, she has jumped out of a plane at the age of 50. Hélène indulges her sweet tooth daily with chocolate and was once mistaken for a motivational dancer at a friend's birthday party. I actually had to look up motivational dancer, which confirms that you can, in fact, learn something new every day. It's my pleasure to hand over the controls to Hélène.
Thanks, Lucy, for that warm introduction. And hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be with you today. So here's a little bit more about me. I live in the city of Chicago, and I've lived in the Chicagoland area for close to 30 years now. I really love it here. As Lucy's mentioned, I'm a life coach, a writer, and speaker. I help people who feel stuck or lost take really bold steps into a life of renewed meaning and purpose. And I love working with people of all ages, but I seem to have found a bit of a niche with 20-somethings and with people in midlife. I also lead workshops on many subjects, including purpose, perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and goal setting. In my blogs, Purpose Stories and Next Act for Women, I share inspirational stories of people who have found their life's calling and are living it at any age. Actually, I was so inspired by our host, Lucy, that I featured her on Purpose Stories. So check out her interview there. I also write about purpose, midlife, women, parenting, and college for other sites, including the Huffington Post, and I'm the author of 3 books, Moving to College, Finding the Right Colleges for You, and Getting Ready for Baby. Today, I love what I do, and I'm constantly challenging myself to try new experiences, both personally and professionally. But I'll admit my truth, which is that I've lived much of my life ruled by fear. Many of my choices about college, my former corporate career, and my relationships were driven by fear of failure, fear of rejection, and fear of being alone. And it's really a terrible way to live. It wasn't until I hit my 50s that I finally confronted my fears and learned to live more authentically. While failure still haunts me at times, I don't let it rule my life anymore. So I'm here to tell you that it's never too late to address your fears. In my coaching, both one-on-one and with groups, fear of failure is a common theme. So today we'll talk about how to address failure and even harness it in our daily lives. Okay. So here's what we'll talk about today. How do we define failure? How do we learn from failure? How do we learn to fear failure? We'll unpack the 5 benefits of failure, and then we'll talk about 5 steps to failing more and better. I don't know why my screen keeps doing this. So let's think about failure. When you think about the word failure, what words come to mind? Most dictionaries are going to give rather boring definitions centered around lack of success. We think of failure as negative, as causing pain and regret, as proof that we're not competent or good enough in some way. I prefer automaker Henry Ford's more hopeful definition. Failure is the opportunity to begin again more intelligently. Now, I want to make sure I clarify that the kind of failure I'll be talking about today is the kind of failure that helps us succeed. And it's not failure from lack of trying, from self-sabotage, or from reckless risk-taking. We're talking about failure when you're trying your best and you're still falling on your face. Okay. So the truth is, when you think about it, failure is necessary. It's life's great teacher. Think of toddlers learning to walk. The more they practice and fail, the better they get. Or young children learning to ride a bike. They have to fall down and fail many times before they get the hang of it. Trial and error. That's how we learn. And the most successful people fail all the time. Thomas Edison's teacher said he was too stupid to learn anything. He was fired from 2 jobs for not being productive enough. But he's also the greatest innovator of all time with 1,093 US patents to his name, including the phonograph and motion picture camera. When he famously failed nearly 10,000 times to create a commercially viable electric light bulb, he learned each time until he achieved success. J.K. Rowling was divorced, jobless, on welfare, and with a dependent child when she penned Harry Potter. She was rejected by a dozen publishers before a small one, Bloomsbury, accepted it and gave her a very small advance, with a first printing of only 1,000 copies. She has now sold more than 400 million copies of her books and is considered to be the most successful author in the UK. Oops, sorry, going back. Michael Jordan didn't make the varsity basketball team as a sophomore in high school. He would become a professional basketball player at 21, and he's famous for saying, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over again in my life, and that's why I succeed." And there are so many more, like Henry Ford and Walt Disney, Albert Einstein and Babe Ruth, who learned from failure and became huge successes. So next time you fail, remember that you're in great company. Of course, even though failure is a great way to learn, it feels really bad. And as we grow up, we learn that success is what's to be celebrated. In school, we get grades that don't distinguish between failure out of laziness versus failure despite hard work. We get praised for the outcome rather than the effort. Our society reveres success stories and makes fun of epic mistakes. So we learn that failure is bad, and it feels bad. The end result, we become afraid of failure. So we avoid failure and the embarrassment, the criticism, the self-doubt that come with it. We keep it safe, staying in our comfort zone, taking the easier route. We don't speak up. We don't try new things. We don't take risks. We may even not give something our best for fear that if we fail, we'll prove just how inadequate we are. In essence, we stay small. All right, let me see. This is where I would do my first poll. Let me ask Lucy if we can conduct our first poll. Yeah. Lucy, can you pull up our first poll, please? So here's our first poll. What's the price you're paying for your fear of failure? And we'll ask you to select one of the following. We'd love to see what you all feel is the biggest price you're paying.
Okay, I'll just give everyone a few more seconds. Close. And then share the results.
Okay, yeah, self-sabotage or procrastination. It's so interesting because right now I'm doing a ton of research on procrastination, and that's the next big topic I want to address in a workshop, because honestly, it's probably the #1 thing I hear from people is procrastination. We all do it, and it's a huge issue, and it really does. It is a big reason, a big price we're paying for our fear of failure. So thank you for that. Okay, let's move on. So when we do experience failure, we also tend to handle it poorly. Some of us don't take ownership. We blame other people or external circumstances. Some of us turn the blame on ourselves. We beat ourselves up. We label ourselves a failure. Some of us go into denial, where we bury our heads in the sand, kind of forget about the failure. And these reactions aren't helpful. They actually prevent us from evaluating our mistakes and from learning from our failures. So Lucy, let's put up our second poll. All right, so let's ask here, when you fail at something, what do you tell yourself? Do you say it's not my fault? Do you blame others or sort of circumstances? Do you say it's all my fault and you beat yourself up? Or do you avoid thinking about it, go into, it's supposed to say go into denial, not into detail, go into denial? Or other, is there something else that you do after you've failed?
Okay, we've collected responses, so now we're going to close the poll, share.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I do that too. I tend to turn the blame on myself. I think that's very common among us. So, and that's not a good way to live. It's really hard when you, probably you're ruminating, you're thinking about all the ways in which you failed. It's very destructive. So, yeah, no surprise there. That's a hard one. Okay, let's move right along. But the truth is that few mistakes are fatal. If we allow them to, they can actually make us stronger. So I want to suggest that it's time to reframe our failures as mistakes, and I've specifically spelled it that way. I'm thinking of, having another take at a goal. Take one, take two, like they do in the movies. Why can't we think of failures the same way? And there are actually benefits to failure. Today we're going to unpack 5 of them. The first one is we learn. As I mentioned, this is how we learn growing up, and it continues throughout our lives. We learn a lot more through failure than we do through success. Think about it. When things are going well, we often don't take the time to think about what led to that success. With failure, we really have an opportunity to take away lessons that are going to help us grow as we move forward. And when we think of failure as a disaster, we become overwhelmed with fear of failure and we just stop trying. But on the other hand, when we think of failure as useful feedback, we can harness it to overcome obstacles. So think of failure as knowledge, information, feedback, learning. Failure helps us grow and learn. It's really essential to self-development and to success. The truth is, if you try to go through life without failing, you won't take risks, you won't strive for more, and in essence, you're not really living. And I love this quote by Tal Ben-Shahar, the happiness guru. We either learn to fail or fail to learn. I never knew where it came from, but apparently that's from him. The second big benefit is we practice a growth mindset. Now, many of you may have heard of her. Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck has researched achievement and success for decades, and she's the one who coined the idea of mindset. She describes the differences between a fixed and a growth mindset. And here's what I've summarized in this chart. So let's say I have a fixed mindset. I believe my abilities are carved in stone, so I'm really anxious to look good, portray my abilities at the best of my potential. When it comes to challenges, I'm going to avoid them. When it comes to obstacles, I'm going to get defensive or I'm going to give up easily. I'll believe that effort is really fruitless. I'll ignore criticism, even if it's useful feedback. And when I'll see others succeeding, I'm going to feel threatened. And as a result, I'll really achieve less than my potential. But as Dweck explains, when you've got a growth mindset, I believe I can improve myself through effort, and I want to learn. When it comes to challenges, I embrace them. Obstacles, I'll persist, even in the face of setbacks. So effort is really the path to mastery here. And I'll come across some criticism, but I'm going to really seek to learn from it. And the success of others is going to teach me and inspire me. And as a result, I'll keep reaching for higher levels of achievement. So for those in the fixed mindset, failure can really define them. They start to believe they are a failure. For those in the growth mindset, failure is still going to feel bad, but it's not going to define them. They're going to keep moving forward. And not surprisingly, the research shows that the vast majority of high achievers have a growth mindset. The good news is that we can change our mindset. Dweck advises we remind ourselves the only way to learn is to risk mistakes. Mistakes are a sign that I'm actually learning. So Lucy, let's conduct our final poll here on mindset. So what is your predominant mindset? We all have some of each, but in general, where do you feel you land?
Okay, I'm going to close the poll.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Well, we have a very enlightened group with us today. In Carol Dweck's research, results usually end up being about 40% for fixed, 40% for growth, and 20% in the other or not sure category. And again, keep in mind we all have a mix of both, but some of us, you know, we tend to lean more on one than on the other. So this is a wonderful, I'm glad that so many of you have already found the power of a growth mindset. Okay, let's move on to our third benefit. How else do we benefit from failure? We become more resilient because every time we fail, we get a little more used to it. We learn the world's not going to end when we make a mistake. We learn we can handle setbacks and keep moving forward. And then we understand that success is going to take hard work and may take many tries. And with more realistic expectations, we're not crushed when things don't go our way. Our fourth benefit is we deepen our relationships. Through failure, we demonstrate our shared humanity. We come to terms with our flaws. We're able to let go of the perfectionism that holds so many of us back. We also demonstrate more self-compassion. Because we've struggled and we've failed, we develop empathy for others who have also experienced setbacks. We become more approachable, more understanding, more generous, and more forgiving. In these ways, failure helps us develop deeper connections. Think about it. Would you rather hang out with someone who's always succeeded in everything they do, or at least talks that way, or someone who's screwed up and can commiserate with you and encourage you through your struggles? And finally, the fifth benefit is that we improve our odds of success. So innovation requires experimentation, trial and error, risk-taking. In the process, we need to be willing to fail. So what counts is not the failure, but what we do with it, how we build on our learning. Every time we fail in the pursuit of an idea or a goal, we gain valuable insights and firsthand experience. What worked? What didn't work? What direction makes sense now? One path closes, but another opens. This learning makes us stronger, keeps us going, shows us the way, and brings us closer and closer to our goals. So I don't know if you knew this, I find it fascinating that in Silicon Valley's culture, which is, as you know, home to the likes of Facebook, Apple, and Google, strongly encourages failure. They live by the mantra, fail fast, fail often. They even have an annual conference called FailCon that takes place in over a dozen cities on 6 continents. They bill themselves as, quote, a conference for startup founders to learn from and prepare for failure so they can iterate and grow fast. Now, I don't know about you, but I love that. I think that's just a wonderful way to think about failure and success. All right. So we've looked at 5 ways in which failure benefits us. So rather than talk about avoiding failure, let's talk about how we can maximize the benefits of failure to achieve more success. In essence, how can we fail more and better? Today, I'll take you through 5 steps to do just that. All right. First, we need to embrace embrace failure as a critical part of success. So I suggest we reframe failure and success. We've discussed how much we learn from failure, how essential it is to success. That willingness to fail is what separates high achievers from the rest of us. They view failure as a temporary setback, an opportunity to learn. So I'd like to propose that you rethink failure in terms of useful feedback and experience, in one word, as learning. We've also talked about how success is very often dependent on how we respond to failure. So I suggest we think of success as a combination of failure, or learning, and grit, or perseverance. It's learning from failure and moving forward informed by that new feedback. So when I give this talk as a workshop, we do interactive exercises and discuss our results. And today, of course, while our webinar doesn't lend itself to the same structure, I'm going to suggest some exercises you may wish to jot down and do on your own time. So here's the first one. Think of a time when you failed. It could be in school, work, in a relationship, in wellness, sports, parenting, you name it. Sometimes it helps to think of a time when you were most embarrassed, ashamed, or full of regret. And then ask yourself, what did you learn from the experience? And have you applied those lessons, and if so, how? So I'll share a personal example. I remember a speech I gave to my division when I worked in corporate America. I practiced and practiced to such an extent I knew the speech cold by heart. So I went up on stage in front of 100 people without any notes. Well, I was a novice at public speaking in my 20s, and I did not account for the nerves I'd experienced once I was actually in front of an audience. About halfway through, I just froze. I had no clue what the next point was that I wanted to make. I had to literally walk to my seat while everyone was watching, get my notes, and walk back. Of course, I was totally mortified, but I did learn some important lessons. I learned I need to rehearse in front of an audience and never present without notes or some reminder, little index cards at arm's reach. And while I'm still working on my presentation skills, with every workshop and speech I give, I haven't frozen up since. So that's a personal example of a failure and how I learned from it. Okay, now I love this concept. This is from the book Fail Fast, Fail Often. The authors recommend we think about anything we'd like to succeed at in terms of how we must first fail. So for instance, if I want to be a great musician, I must first play a lot of bad music. If I want to become a successful business person who makes shrewd decisions, I must first spend time making bad business decisions. If I want to write a novel, I must first write bad fiction, etc., etc. You get the idea. Most of us are not born with natural ability, and even if we have an aptitude, putting it to use takes dedicated practice, which is bound to include failure. So ask yourself, what could you say to yourself about something you're trying to accomplish in your life? Here's what I could say about my public speaking. If I want to become an expert speaker, I must first be a mediocre one. All right, moving on to step 2. We've now reframed failure as success, and we understand how we learn from it. The second step is to confront your fear of failure. If fear is keeping you stuck and not allowing you to move forward on a goal, ask yourself, what's the absolute worst thing that could happen? And next you ask, how realistic is this scenario? Then you'll say, how can I lessen its likelihood? Have I taken all preventive measures to minimize the risk of it happening? And next, you come up with a plan of action should the worst case scenario actually happen, despite your preventive measures. What would you do? Where would you get help? What personal strengths and experiences would you pull on? Figure out how you would learn and grow and move forward despite the failure. And then you move on to the next worst thing that could happen and go through the same questions and so on. And you do this for any and all fears that come up for you around this goal that you have that you're not able to move forward around because of failure. Very often, the anticipation of failure is worse than the actual failure. So naming your fears and preparing for the worst is a powerful way to diffuse those fears. It allows you to regain some control and feel more confident moving forward. So your next exercise will be to ask yourself, what's something you'd like to do, but you're stuck because of fear of failure? Go through these questions and write down your answers. I'm going to give you an example from a client of mine, we'll call her Susan, who worked in sales for a small company. Susan felt underpaid relative to the business she brought in and had not received a raise in 2 years. Still, she was afraid of approaching the owner about a pay raise. When she tried before, he told her money was tight. So I asked, what's the worst thing that could happen if you approach him? And Susan said her biggest fear, honestly, was that she'd be fired. The owner apparently had a bit of a temper. Then I asked, how realistic is this? When Susan looked at the facts, this outcome seemed unlikely. Susan was the small company's top salesperson, so they really depended on her. So then I asked, how can you lessen the likelihood of being fired? To make sure the owner was fully aware of her contributions, Susan prepared a graph for her growing sales relative to her compensation, along with a % contribution to the firm's profits. She prepared her pitch as if it really were a sales presentation. And then I asked, if despite this pitch, you get fired, what are you going to do? So Susan spoke of the possibility of opening her own competing business, taking her clients with her, or becoming a consultant to other small businesses. She felt that if the owner fired her for asking for fair compensation, it might just be the push she needed, that it was time to leave. So long story short, Susan found the courage to push past her fear and schedule that pitch with the owner, and after some back and forth, some hemming and hawing, they did reach an agreement that included a nice increase in compensation. So this is the kind of exercise I would want you to do, thinking about something you're afraid to move forward on, is really sort of take yourself through what's the reality here. And if the reality does happen, if there's something really terrible you're fearing and that does come to fruition, what would you do with that? Just even thinking it through really lessens a lot of the power of that fear. Okay, let's move on to step 3. So we've reframed failure as success, we've confronted our fears, and the third step is really to take action, because that's the best way to prove to yourself that you are capable, despite your fears. Whether you succeed or fail and keep going anyway, you're showing yourself that you're not staying stuck. You can move forward. Science has shown that our attitudes and beliefs are reinforced by our behaviors. When we practice a new behavior, this allows us to see ourselves in a new light. Our self-image completely changes, and our story changes to match our behavior. So we begin to believe our new narrative is true. In essence, we are what we do. So as a coach, I help my clients develop goals that allow them to own and believe that failure will not keep them small, that they're strong enough to persevere. Taking action doesn't have to be huge and dramatic. You don't have to put everything on the line. If you're feeling stuck because of fear, my advice is to start small. Try new things with manageable risks. So here's a follow-up exercise. Once you've defined something that you've been putting off due to fear of failure, ask yourself, what's one small step I could take to move forward? So in the case of my client Susan, the one who was afraid of asking for a raise, that first step was gathering data. By looking at the numbers, her confidence in her argument and her value grew, and she was able to take the next step and keep going. All right, step 4. Let's say you push past your fears, you take action, and still you fail. Now what? So I suggest you ask yourself, how could I respond to this failure in a way that would make me proud? Remind yourself that all successful people make mistakes. See this as an opportunity to learn and improve. And do not label yourself a failure. Seriously, how would you treat a friend who experienced the same failure? You would likely show him or her compassion. So the question is, how can you show yourself that same understanding, that same compassion? At the same time, again, don't fall into blaming others. Accept this mistake as yours and vow to grow from it. So how can you grow? Well, first, gather feedback from as many sources as possible to learn what happened. What went well? How did you improve over the last time? Make sure to acknowledge that. And then what caused the failure? Was it a bad idea, a wrong assumption, a lack of skill? Then harness the failure for good. What can you learn from the failure? How can you use this learning to get a better outcome next time? How do you need to revamp your plan of action with this new learning? So here's an example from my work. I remember the first workshop I gave. This was before I used PowerPoint, so I'd bought an easel and a large paper pad, and I'd taken great pains to handwrite my slides on paper. Despite my best marketing efforts, I got only 2 attendees. I felt very disappointed and honestly a bit embarrassed. After the workshop, I really had to work hard to reframe the experience. I patted myself on the back for having the courage to put myself out there. I learned what worked and did not work in this workshop. I also learned this location would not be ideal to attract my ideal clients, my ideal audience. I decided I need to switch to PowerPoint for a more professional presentation and so I could more easily make edits. And I made a plan to partner with locations that would do more marketing and garner a larger attendance for future workshops. So I got a lot out of this experience, despite only having 2 people there, and I chose to leverage those learnings as I became a more expert workshop presenter. So here's the final step. I urge you to make a practice out of failure. Because if we aim to make significant changes in our lives, we often have to stretch to the limit of our abilities. And if we're not failing, we're really not pushing outside our comfort zone. We're playing it safe, we're staying small, and we're not learning. So to learn more, we need to take manageable risks that lead to more opportunity for success, yet run the very real risk of failure. You may want to give yourself a goal to fail on a regular basis. Start small, like 1 failure per week. This is a practice that takes time. It's like building a new muscle. And it gets easier. Find personal challenges to undertake, small ones, and try them out, like take a class in salsa dancing or meditation or watercolor. Try speaking in your high school broken Spanish. Go jogging for the first time in years. Play a new board game. Then when you fail, congratulate yourself for having demonstrated courage by taking a risk and celebrate achieving your weekly failure goal. Think of each failure as a chance to learn and grow. So ask yourself, how can I make a practice out of failure? I personally have done this by trying new things, ones I haven't done before and I'm not likely to be good at least not right away. Recently, I've taken classes in meditation and calligraphy, and I've tried my hand at more complex cooking recipes. It's really good to be a novice. And I highly recommend meetups and Dabble as great ways to explore new skills and experiences. There are a ton of great classes and groups meeting in Chicago and really in cities all around the US and I think even internationally. So allow yourself to practice being a novice and maybe even failing. All right, so let's review the 5 steps to using failure in order to succeed. Number 1, reframe how you define failure and success. Think of failure as a learning. Number 2, confront your fear of failure. What's the worst thing that can happen, and how will you grow from it if it does happen? Number 3, take action. Show yourself through baby steps that you can move forward despite your fears. Number 4, make the most of your mistakes. Grow from your failures by evaluating them and revamping your plans with that new feedback. And number 5, make a practice out of failure. Set a weekly goal to take manageable risks that may very well end up in failure. Failure is a skill that needs practice. Become good at it, and you'll maximize your learning and growing and your chance at success. So I love to give recommendations for further learning. And if you're interested in learning more about the subject of failure and success, here are my favorite books on the topic. They each approach the subject from very different perspectives, and I find the research in this area fascinating. And if you're looking for more tools, many of these books offer effective exercises for personal growth. And that's it for me. I really appreciate you all attending today, and thank you so much to Lucy for inviting me. I'm happy to take questions now. I'm also happy to continue the conversation after this session. So please feel free to reach out in any of these ways that you see here to find me. Lucy, are there any questions?
No, not yet. I'm sure people are going to start frequently. Okay, here we go. There's somebody also recommended an author and coach of several books on the same issues. And the address is margiewarrell.com. I'm going to send it to all. Oh,
great.
Fascinating topic. Thank you, somebody wrote.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
It's a favorite because it's a huge issue for so many of us.
I think what was so cool about it, too, was that, you know, when you first hear it, harnessing failure, it's almost scary, but I love it. I think that's it's really a great topic.
Yeah, I think it's so important to be able to, you know, it's all about how you look at something. So in a lot of the coaching work and a lot of psychology is all about changing the lens with which you see things. You know, what are you looking through? A lens, a negative lens, or are you looking through, okay, how can I make an opportunity out of this? How can I make the most of something? And that's true for a lot of different areas of our lives. And certainly when it comes to failure, it's just got such a negative connotation. And like I said, it's not going to feel good, but, you know, how can I use it? How can I use that experience, that learning to, you know, to grow as a person and to improve and to do better next time? So it's just all about how, you know, what perspective you take, how you look at things.
Great. Somebody asked if you could go back to the slide that has the resources for a minute. I just want to let everybody know it's going to be a recording, so you'll be able to watch this again.
Yes, let me find that. Where's my cursor?
And I do have questions that popped up, which is great.
Whoops, sorry. I'm out of my, now you get to see my.
That's cool.
All right. So I'm going to have to go through my slides. Yeah, no, there's some, I'm sorry, what was the next thing you said after the, did you have was there a question? Oh, there we go. Oops. There it is.
There we go. Yes, there are more questions. Someone's son is failing in class. How should she begin to speak about it? He's about 17 and knows everything. What salient points do you start with based on what you shared?
So it sounds like this is somebody in 17 in high school who's failing a class.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you know, obviously there's a lot going on and there's a lot to be learned from failing the class. So it could be one of those examples, you know, when I ask people to share examples of a failure and what they learned from it, one of the examples is often I failed a class in high school or in college. So it can be a great opportunity for self-discovery and for learning to actually fail the class. But obviously, if it's still early on in the year and the person you know, there's still a lot you can do. It's where he hasn't failed the class yet. He's just not, sounds like, I'm assuming it's just beginning of the year. Then it's, you know, with a teenager, and I have two 19-year-olds, it is hard to, as a parent, to have that conversation with your child. And it's also an age where self-advocacy is really important. So the hope would be, the encouragement that I would give to a parent is to encourage your child, your teenager, to go and get help. That's, you know, absolutely, at this age, I think you said it was a son, this young man needs to see, I am not doing well in this class. I need to figure out what's going on. What is it I'm missing? And you know, go and talk to the teacher and figure out what kind of help he needs and really figure that out for himself. So encouraging the student to get help, to go talk to the teacher, to go to the, you know, if there's a tutoring place in the school or whatever it is, kind of help, or to get help from other students. But to really have, you know, ask them to take charge and take action against their goals, against, wanting to improve, because at this point it's really kind of out of your hands. All you can do is encourage them, but obviously you can't do the work for them, and you can't make them do anything. It becomes harder and harder as they get older. They just need to know that they are empowered to go and figure out how to get the help they need in order to improve, or what's holding them back.
Thank you. Another question is, do you have any resources that deal with an experience from a long time ago that has become a platform for fear and regret?
Oh my God, that's a huge one. Yeah, so we all have those, and we have, and it's interesting because I teach a class on storytelling, our own stories, and we all have these narratives, and oftentimes they come from long, long ago, from our childhoods, that are steeped in anger, in sadness, in regret, and it's I don't know if you can ever fully get over them, so to speak, and I'm not sure that's the goal, but there are some great resources, and I can on sort of, again, changing your perspective on your story and looking at past behaviors of your own, either things you did or things that happened to you, and framing them in a different way. How can you take a look at that experience, whether it was, again, something you really did something wrong, something that maybe you did something wrong to somebody else, or maybe you had something happen to you that just wasn't fair, and look and sort of change the way you look at it to make it more of a survivor, a hero story rather than a victim story, in the case of somebody who was victimized. And, think of yourself as somebody who's resilient, who's strong, who's a survivor, who's a thriver. And so I teach that in one of my workshops is, how to shift from that victim story to the hero story. And in the case of, something that you've done that you have huge regret over, it's all about self-compassion in my mind. It's about understanding where you were in your life at that point in time, what was going on for you, understanding why you might have behaved that way, and forgiving yourself, and if need be, asking for forgiveness from the other person as well, of course, but just having some compassion for your humanity. And, we all have things we've done that we regret, and being able to look at those and say, boy, this is what was going on in my life at the time, or I didn't know any better, or this is not, this is the way I was taught, or not giving yourself excuses. It's just really coming from a place of understanding and forgiveness and compassion, and allowing yourself to own that mistake, and be able to move forward and not stay stuck in it, because that's the kind of thing that absolutely can stop you in your tracks and can stop you from moving forward if you just keep staying stuck in that story of either blaming others or blaming yourself, anger toward others, or beating yourself up. Those are classic scenarios from the past that can really hinder our personal growth.
Great. I think we have time for one or perhaps two more questions. A person wrote, "Thank you for your presentation. Really very nice. Great insights." She wonders if there's a point at which one should just be fine with cutting their losses and not trying again.
Well, right. So, let's say you tried and tried and tried, and you're still failing and failing and failing, right? Well, so the question becomes, are you trying the same way, or are you really, learning and trying something different the next time? So obviously, if you keep doing things the same way and falling flat on your face, you're not really improving what you're doing, and you're not really giving yourself the best chance of success, right? So, but let's say you have made improvements, you've learned, you've done all the things I've said in here to do better next time, and maybe you've seen slight incremental changes, but not huge changes. I would suggest, this is where you've got to take a look at how much do I want this, and if this is really something you're passionate about and you're really stuck on, I think I'm doing everything I'm supposed to, I think I'm learning, I think I'm improving each time, but I just can't get there, I would suggest then you get external help, whether it's from a mentor or coach or somebody who can help you look at it with fresh eyes and help you understand where you're stuck, why you're not making progress on this. Because, we all get very tunnel vision and we think we're doing everything in our power to improve or do the best work, but sometimes it's just hard to see from when we're so close to it. So having a fresh set of eyes from the outside can be a big help.
Thank you so much. I know there are other questions, but I actually have to leave because this room is the conference room. And,
right.
And I also want to be fair to you, Hélène, because you've given up a part of your day. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. We've got Hélène's very kindly shared her email if you want to reach out to her.
Yes, please
You've been great. I've loved this, and I swear I've been waiting all summer for your talk. So
thank you, Lucy.
You got to do it. And I just wanted to let people know that in October we have 2 more webinars. October 12th, we're going to talk about working with difficult people, which a friend of mine in the office said, if you've never worked with a difficult person, then you're the difficult person. So I love that she said that. But that should be fun and informative. And on the 24th, we'll be speaking with an alum who works with artificial intelligence. So I think that's a cool topic. And just in the last few seconds, November is Career Month. I'm planning 16 webinars on different themes. The first theme is career transitions, the second one is job skills, and the third one is industries. So I hope that most of you can make at least some of them. But again, thank you so much for participating, and thank you, Hélène. It was great. I loved listening to you.
Oh, you're so welcome. I loved being with you. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and I hope you will reach out and would love to hear from you.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye-bye.